The D'Souza family moved into a quiet town on the edge of a forest. They found a large old house for a low price. The agent said it was empty for years but strong and good. The family liked it right away. Joseph D'Souza and his wife Maria moved in with their 2 children, Luke and Anna. Near the back of the house stood a locked storeroom. Behind that, across a stone wall, was an old cemetery. The air always felt cold near that area. But the family was happy with their new home and started settling in peacefully. Maria was a little uncomfortable. She had heard stories from the neighbors. They whispered that people once saw shadows near the storeroom. Some said they heard voices at night. But Joseph didn't believe such things. He told Maria not to worry. He was a strong Catholic and kept a cross in every room. He believed prayers would keep them safe. The children loved the big garden and wide rooms. But Anna sometimes felt like someone was watching her. One evening, she told her mother about a strange woman she saw near the storeroom. Maria asked Anna to explain what she saw. Anna said she looked out the window and saw a woman in white near the storeroom. The woman had no face. Her head was turned to the side, and her hands were folded like she was praying. Maria shivered. She told Joseph, but he said it was just a dream. That night, Maria placed a rosary near the storeroom door. She whispered a short prayer and sprinkled holy water. The air felt still for a moment, then a breeze passed her cheek. She hurried back inside the house, heart pounding. That same night, around midnight, a loud sound came from the backyard. Joseph and Maria jumped out of bed. They rushed to the window. The storeroom door, which was always locked, now stood wide open. Inside something moved. Joseph ran out with a flashlight. He found nothing but old boxes and a cracked mirror. He closed the door again and locked it. The next day he nailed the door shut. But Maria felt something had already come out. That night Anna had a nightmare. She screamed that the woman in white was in her room, whispering her name. The family prayed together in the morning. Joseph kept a crucifix under Anna's pillow. Luke, who was only 7, said he heard voices in the hallway during the night. He said someone called him by name, but it didn't sound like his mother. Maria was now very worried. She placed holy pictures in every room. Joseph called the local church. Father Michael, a kind old priest, came to visit. He walked around the house and looked at the storeroom. He said the land was very old. It had once belonged to the church long ago. Father Michael told them a story. Many years ago, a nun named Sister Catherine lived in that area. She cared for the poor and prayed for lost souls. But one day she vanished. People said she was buried near the back wall by mistake, under the storeroom. Her soul could not rest. Since then, strange things happened to anyone who stayed near the house. Joseph listened carefully. Father Michael said he would bless the house the next morning. That night, strange things started again. The mirror in the storeroom cracked loudly, though no one was near it. At 3 a.m., Maria woke to the sound of footsteps. She looked beside her. Joseph was asleep. The footsteps stopped near her bedroom door. Slowly it creaked open by itself. A tall figure stood outside. Maria sat frozen. The figure was dressed in white robes like a nun, but the face was dark and hollow. The figure lifted its hand and pointed at her. Then it faded like smoke. Maria clutched her rosary and cried silently. Morning felt very far away. She didn't sleep again that night. When she told Joseph, his face turned pale for the first time. Father Michael returned that morning with another priest, Father Peter. They brought holy water, incense, and candles. The whole family stayed together in the living room while the priests blessed every room. When they reached the storeroom, they both paused. The door was nailed shut, but cold air flowed from its cracks. Father Peter whispered that something inside didn't want to leave. As they prayed louder, the walls trembled slightly. Inside, something crashed. The cracked mirror had fallen again. This time, it broke completely into sharp, shining pieces. A long moan echoed through the storeroom's wooden walls. The priest said it was not over. They would need to hold a full exorcism that night. They asked the family to fast and pray. Joseph and Maria did as told. Anna and Luke were sent to stay with their aunt for safety. That night, the priests returned with candles, crucifixes, and prayer books. They opened the storeroom slowly. The air inside was heavy and cold. Shadows moved even when the light was still. As they began to pray, a loud cry came from the corner. The figure of the ghostly nun stood near the broken mirror. Father Michael held up his crucifix and prayed loudly. Father Peter sprinkled holy water in all corners. The ghostly figure began to twist and scream. She said, "Let me rest, let me rest." They prayed harder, asking God to release her soul. The figure cried louder, then suddenly dropped to the floor. A wind swept through the room, blowing out all the candles. Then silence. The air grew warm. The priest said the spirit had left. They blessed the mirror pieces and buried them near the church. The storeroom was sealed with holy oil and locked forever. The children returned home a few days later. The house felt peaceful now. There were no more footsteps, whispers, or shadows. Joseph and Maria thanked the priests and promised to keep their faith strong. They placed a statue of Saint Michael near the storeroom. Every Sunday they lit a candle for Sister Catherine's soul. The family lived in peace for many years. They never used the storeroom again. Even visitors were told to stay away from that corner. The memory of those dark days stayed with them always. The ghost had gone, but the story remained. Sometimes people passing by the house say they feel watched. A few say they see a woman in white standing near the storeroom door, holding a rosary. But she never enters the house again. Joseph says it's her way of saying thank you. The town remembers the story of the haunted house, the spirit of the forgotten nun, and the prayers that set her free. It is a story of fear, faith, and family. And even now, the D'Souza family lights a candle every year, hoping Sister Catherine's soul rests forever in peace. Moving towards the next story. George was a young and humble boy who had recently joined a company called Atlas Group. He had been hired in the administration department and was excited to start his new job. Everything was new to him: the office, the people, and the work environment. For the first few days, he tried his best to learn the rules and complete his duties sincerely. But soon, strange things started happening around him. Whenever he placed important files on his desk, he would later find them missing. After searching, he would find them in another part of the office without explanation. At first, George thought it was just a mistake. He believed someone else might be moving the files for some reason. But when it started happening regularly, he grew more confused. He clearly remembered placing the files correctly, yet they still moved to places he had never even gone near. Still, he chose not to overthink and focused on his tasks. One afternoon, while organizing some paperwork, his desk suddenly started shaking. There was no earthquake, no wind, and no one touched the desk, but it moved as if something pushed it. He looked around, but no one seemed to notice. He thought maybe it was a building issue or the floor was uneven. He didn't want to sound foolish to his colleagues, so he said nothing. Weeks passed, and these strange events kept happening. Files went missing, chairs moved slightly, and lights dimmed without reason. George kept ignoring all these signs, thinking that maybe stress or tiredness was playing tricks on him. Deep down, though, a part of him felt something was not right within the office. Then one day his senior called him for a quick talk. The company needed someone to manage the night shift for a month, and George was assigned the duty. He didn't object. He was new and wanted to be seen as hardworking. The office at night had fewer staff. Each person worked in different cabins. George was given a separate cabin where he had to work alone. At first, everything seemed normal. The peace and quiet at night allowed him to focus better on his job. After 2 days, however, he noticed something odd. The light in his cabin would suddenly start flickering. It would blink for a few minutes and then return to normal. He thought maybe there was an electrical issue. The building was old, so flickering lights seemed like a reasonable thing to expect. He reported it to the building management, but the light kept flickering. One night, while he was working late, he heard something that made his skin crawl. A low whisper from the room next door, which was supposed to be empty. The room next to his cabin had been vacant for months. Nobody entered it. Still, George clearly heard creepy whispers, soft and slow, as if someone was talking in pain. He froze and turned his head slowly toward the wall. The sound stopped. He stepped outside to check, but the hallway was empty and cold. The air felt strange, heavier than usual. He asked one of the janitors about the empty room, but the janitor quickly changed the topic and walked away. George felt a strange fear growing inside him. For the next few nights he kept hearing the sounds. Sometimes whispers, other times soft banging from the vacant room. He even started hearing faint footsteps walking above him, although there was no floor above that part of the building. He knew something was wrong, but he did not want to seem afraid. He continued working, but every time he heard something, his hands would tremble slightly. One night, something even worse happened. One of his staff members who worked in a different cabin started making strange noises. The noises weren't normal. They were unnatural groans, sharp and disturbing. The other staff members who were also present rushed toward the cabin. They found their colleague standing still, his body stiff, and his eyes wide open but lifeless. He was whispering in a strange language that nobody could understand. It felt as if he was possessed by some other entity. His voice was not his own, it was deep, hollow, and cold. The staff panicked and called an ambulance. The man was taken away while still mumbling those horrible words. This event shook everyone. Fear filled the entire night staff. They didn't want to work anymore. News about the incident reached the owner of Atlas Group. But the owner laughed it off and refused to believe anything supernatural was happening. He thought it was just a medical condition or stress that caused such behavior. But the staff knew what they had seen. Still, since the owner didn't agree, no serious action was taken. However, the fear was real and the office had to shut down for a few days due to panic. A week later, George returned to work the night shift. Many staff members had refused to return, but he needed the job. That night, something happened that he would never forget. As he was working quietly, he suddenly noticed a strange movement in the corner of the room. A white, fog-like soul slowly moved across the room. It floated from one corner to the other and disappeared into the wall. It had no face, no features, just a figure of light and shadow. George felt his heart racing. He froze in place, unable to move. He kept staring at the spot where the figure had vanished. The room suddenly turned colder. His breath became visible in the air. The light started flickering again and the whispering returned, louder this time as if someone was screaming inside his ears. George ran out of the office. He didn't even shut down his system. That night he did not go home. He sat at a tea stall near the office until sunrise, shivering with fear and confusion. He knew he couldn't go back there again. The next day he spoke to his senior about what he saw. His senior listened silently but gave no reply. It felt like no one wanted to accept the truth. Maybe they were scared too. Maybe they had experienced the same but kept silent. George stopped coming to the night shift. He worked a few more days in the daytime but felt distant and cold. Even during the day he would sometimes feel like someone was watching him. He avoided the cabin where the staff member had been possessed. He avoided the whole hallway. Finally, after a month had passed, George made a decision. He walked into his senior's office and handed in his resignation letter. He gave no reason. He simply said he could not continue. He packed his things and left without saying much to anyone. The haunted memories of the night shift still haunted his mind. A week later he joined another company in a different part of the city. The new office was bright, cheerful, and busy. But deep inside, George still carried the shadows of Atlas Group. He never spoke about the things he saw at the previous job. He tried to forget, but some nights the memories returned. In his dreams he would see the soul floating again, flickering lights, and hear whispers in the dark. He would wake up sweating and scared. He avoided working late and always stayed around people. Even though the new job was better, the fear in his heart never truly left. Sometimes while working alone he would pause and look behind just to make sure nothing was standing there. The building of Atlas Group remained open, but many staff members had left. Stories of ghost sightings, voices, and shadow figures spread quietly among the workers. Some said the office was built over old land where strange things had happened in the past. Others believed someone had performed black magic in the cabin years ago. No one really knew the truth, but the fear stayed. George never returned. He stayed far from that area and avoided even talking about it. The horror he faced had changed him forever. Years later, someone from Atlas Group tried to reach out to George. They wanted to talk to him about the events that happened during his night shifts. But George refused. He did not want to open those memories again. He had seen things that could not be explained. Things that science and reason could not answer. The whispers, the soul, the possession, all of it still lived in his nightmares. The fear was now part of his life, hidden behind his quiet smile and careful eyes. Even though he tried to live normally, George could never walk into any dark room without turning on the light first. He would never sit with his back to a door. He avoided silence. Even when alone he kept some sound on, music, a fan, anything. The silence reminded him of that night. That night when he saw the soul. The memory of that moving fog, the possessed staff member, and the cold air would never fade. It was no longer just a memory. It had become a part of who he was. The Atlas Group office still stands, but no one talks openly about the events. A few employees still work there, but they never stay late. The rooms remain, the cabins remain, but the soul of fear continues to live in that building. Some say if you walk the hallway late at night, you can still hear whispers. Some say the ghost of the one who was once possessed still roams the cabin. But no one dares to find out. And George? He just hopes never to cross paths with that darkness again. Moving towards the next story. On a calm night, a man was driving down a quiet rural road. The area around him was empty, with no buildings, no people, and no sign of any town nearby. The road stretched far into the distance, with tall trees on both sides. It was peaceful and he liked the silence. He had the windows rolled up and soft music played from the radio. The man was alone, heading somewhere far away, but he did not feel afraid. Everything looked normal and there was nothing strange in sight. He felt relaxed and focused only on the road ahead. As he kept driving, a heavy fog began to cover the road. It rolled in slowly and soon he could hardly see anything beyond a few feet in front of his car. The fog was thick and white and it made the trees look like shadows. The silence around him became deeper and more unsettling. Even the sound of his engine seemed quieter in the fog. The man turned on his headlights, but the fog was too strong for them to help much. He started feeling a bit uneasy as the road disappeared in the mist. While he tried to stay calm, the radio suddenly changed. The music he was listening to was cut off by a wave of static. There had been no signal problems before, so he was confused. He turned the knob, trying to find another station, but all he heard was crackling noise. The static came and went as if something was interfering with it. The man thought it might just be the weather, but he felt something was wrong. It was strange how everything had worked perfectly until the fog came. Then, without warning, the temperature inside the car dropped. The air became cold, almost freezing even though he had the heater on. He checked the settings and turned up the heat, but it made no difference. His breath became visible in the cold air. He rubbed his hands together, trying to stay warm. It was very unusual. The heater had been working just minutes ago. Now it felt like something was draining the warmth from the car. The man glanced around, wondering if there was a problem with the engine, but the cold seemed to come from nowhere. The strange events continued. He looked down at the dashboard and noticed something strange with the clock. It had started flashing random times, jumping from one number to another without stopping. One moment it said 12 o'clock, the next 4:56, then 23:11. The numbers changed so quickly that he could not read them. He had never seen anything like it. This was no regular electrical problem. Everything seemed to be going wrong at once and he had no idea why. The man was starting to feel nervous, but he told himself to stay calm and keep driving. Suddenly the engine sputtered. It coughed once, then again, and then completely shut off. The car slowed down and came to a stop in the middle of the empty road. The man tried turning the key, but the engine would not start. There was no warning, no sound of trouble before. It just died without reason. He looked around, but there was no other car, no person, no help in sight. He was completely alone, stuck in a strange place, surrounded by fog and silence. The man began to feel trapped and helpless as the engine remained silent. He picked up his cell phone, hoping to call someone for help. But there was no signal at all. The signal bars were gone. Worse, he saw the battery drop quickly. It had been more than half full just minutes ago, but now it was draining fast. Within seconds it went down to 20%, then 10. He had never seen a phone battery fall so quickly. He turned it off to save power, but it felt useless. He was in the middle of nowhere with no way to contact anyone. A deep feeling of fear started to grow inside him. Looking ahead, he saw something even more disturbing. Strange shadows were moving across the road. They flickered in and out of view as if dancing in the fog. They had no clear shape, but he could tell they weren't natural. The man stared at them, trying to understand what they were. They didn't look like animals or people. They were just dark shapes that moved without reason. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. He blinked and looked again, but the shadows were still there, shifting and moving slowly as if watching him from a distance. Then the man heard a sound that chilled his blood. From the back seat of the car he heard a whisper. It was faint, like someone speaking very softly. He turned around quickly, but no one was there. The back seat was empty. He kept listening and heard it again, a voice whispering words he couldn't understand. It was coming from behind him inside the car. But there was no one there. He started to breathe faster. The fear inside him was growing with every passing second. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew it wasn't normal. The headlights of his car, already weak in the fog, began to flicker. They blinked a few times, then went out completely. Now he was in complete darkness, surrounded by fog with no lights, no sound, and no way to see what was around him. The man sat in silence, trying to stay calm. He could barely see the road anymore. Everything around him was covered in thick fog. The silence was loud, almost painful. He had never felt so alone. The car was dead, the phone was dying, and now he had no light to help him. As he sat in the dark, the man heard footsteps outside the car. They were slow and steady, moving around the vehicle. He looked out the windows but saw nothing. The footsteps continued, circling the car as if someone was walking around it again and again. His heart was beating fast. He tried to tell himself it was just an animal, but deep down he knew it wasn't. The steps sounded human. They were careful and slow, almost like whoever was walking wanted him to hear. He waited, not daring to move, hoping it would stop soon. Suddenly, handprints appeared on the windows. Wet and smeared, They looked like someone had pressed their hands against the glass from the outside. They showed up one after another, leaving trails of water on the windows. The man's eyes widened in fear. He leaned forward, trying to see who was there, but saw no one. The prints were too high to be from a child and too small for a man. They appeared slowly, like someone was sliding their hands down the glass. He reached for the lock button, his hands shaking, afraid of what would come next. He tried turning the key again, hoping the car would start. It didn't. But something else happened. The radio turned on by itself. Music started playing, a slow, haunting tune from the 1940s. The man had never heard it before. It was old, scratchy, and sounded like it came from a different time. The radio should not have been working at all. He had turned it off earlier and the engine was dead. Yet the song kept playing. The voice in the music was calm and eerie. It felt like the song was meant just for him and he couldn't turn it off. Looking in the rearview mirror, he saw something that made him freeze. For a second, a figure appeared in the back seat. It looked like a person sitting quietly staring at him. But when he turned around, the seat was empty. The figure was gone. He looked back at the mirror, but it had vanished. He wasn't sure what he had seen, but it felt real. His skin was cold and his hands were trembling. Every part of him wanted to get out of the car, to escape from whatever was happening, even though he didn't know what he would find outside. Then a girl appeared in front of the car. She was wearing a white dress and looked very young. She stood still, her face hidden by her hair. The man couldn't understand where she had come from. One moment the road was empty. The next she was there. She did not move, did not speak. Just stood there in the fog staring at the car. The man blinked, thinking it might be his imagination, but she was still there. Slowly he opened the door, stepping out to help her or ask who she was. But as soon as he stepped out, she vanished. Not a sound, not a movement, she simply disappeared. The road was empty again. The man looked around in every direction, calling out, but there was no answer. Then from the woods nearby, a scream echoed. It was loud, sharp, and full of pain. It came from far away, but it was clear. The scream made his blood run cold. It didn't sound human. It sounded like something was in pain or trying to scare him. He wanted to run but didn't know where to go. He noticed a building in the distance, an old house with one light flickering inside. It looked abandoned, but the light was strange. He felt drawn to it. Maybe someone was there. Maybe he could find help. He walked toward it carefully. The house was broken, with vines growing up the walls and windows cracked. The door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, everything was covered in dust and cobwebs. The flickering light came from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The air smelled old and damp, and the floor creaked under his feet. On the walls he saw old photos. The pictures were of people standing in groups, smiling or posing. But something was wrong with them. Every face in every photo was scratched out. Deep lines ran across the faces as if someone had tried to destroy them. The photos looked old, some in black and white, others faded in color. He stepped closer to one of them and felt his stomach drop. He saw himself in one of the pictures. He had never been in this house before, yet there he was, standing among people he did not know. Before he could react, the door slammed shut behind him. He ran to it, pulling the handle, but it wouldn't open. It felt locked from the outside. He was trapped. Then he looked at the mirror hanging on the wall and saw something horrible. A man was hanging from the ceiling, his face pale, eyes open. But when he turned around to look, there was nothing there. The room was empty. He looked back at the mirror, but now it was blank. The man had vanished. His heart was racing and sweat poured down his face. He screamed for help, but his voice echoed strangely in the house. It repeated back to him, but with different words, words he never said. He yelled again, but the echo changed what he said. It sounded like a second voice was hiding inside his own. Then a horrible smell filled the room. It was the smell of something dead and rotten. Objects in the house began to move on their own. A chair fell over. The lights blinked. He heard something breathing in the dark. Then a voice whispered his name, from inside the walls. Terrified, he ran back to where he thought the road was. But when he found his car, it looked completely different. It was now covered in dirt, moss, and leaves. It looked like it had been there for many years, left behind and forgotten. The tires were flat and the paint was peeling. He could hardly believe it. It was the same car, but it looked dead. Then he saw the girl in white again. She was walking toward him. Her dress now had blood on it. Her eyes were dark. She didn't blink. She just kept walking. He screamed as loud as he could, but no one came. The girl kept coming closer. His vision began to blur. Everything around him started spinning. He felt weak, like something was pulling him down into darkness. Then he passed out, falling to the ground beside the old car. He didn't know what was real anymore. Time, place, and reality had all twisted into something terrifying. The world around him faded away as he lost consciousness, unsure if he would ever wake up again, or where he would be if he did. When he finally opened his eyes, he was back inside his car. The engine was running. It was morning. The fog was gone. The sun was shining. He looked around and realized he was parked in a completely different place. Everything looked normal again. His phone was working and the radio played soft music. But as he drove away, a news report came on. It said the road he had been on had been closed 30 years ago after a deadly accident. Many people had disappeared there. The reporter said no one ever came back. But somehow he did.